The trick is to keep the lid on,
said Naomi. She looked over Sunny's shoulder at the frying pan. Sunny peered quizzically at the face of this woman who had been suddenly added to the crew. A single rose in Naomi's hair excluded an air of artificial beauty. A single blue rose. Naomi took a lid from the kitchen cabinet and placed it over the pan. The lid dampened the soft sizzle of the butter and oil.
Now let it cook for 1 minute, she explained. You like cooking, don't you? Good for you.
This? It's my sunny side up fortune telling. When it turns out good, it means something good is going to happen.
I don't know what exactly Sunny divined from her eggs. She never told me. Naomi leaned in.
So that's why you don't cook them over easy.
Suddenly realized she hadn't set the timer. She quickly grabbed the kitchen timer, a yellow cartoon duck, and turned its dial. To Sunny, cooking eggs meant timing them. It's important to do things by the book. Recipes exist to help make a delicious meal, after all. But when the guidelines become rule and rote, cooking loses all meaning.
The secret to good cooking, Naomi said, is to keep in mind who is going to eat it.
Sunny tried to say something in reply, but couldn't find the words. Naomi looked around the room in search of a new topic. On the wall was a framed photograph of a young woman with short-cropped silver hair and willful blue eyes that gazed at some distant point in the night sky.
Is this your mother?
Naomi asked.
Yes.
Sunny stared down at the frying pan, less because she was worried about the eggs than she was unable to meet the woman's eyes.
She's really beautiful,
Naomi said, meaning it. The woman in the picture was beautiful. This girl is like me, Naomi probably thought. She knew of Sunny's loneliness. Both had lost their parents at a young age and were left alone out in the world. The child would likely never feel truly at home with her surrogate family aboard Nomad. Naomi turned to face Sunny, put her hand on her own hair, and said,
May I?
Without lifting her head, Sunny watched Naomi's hand as it took out the blue rose and placed it behind the girl's ear.
See, Sunny? We girls have to look our best.
Sunny blushed. She'd never received a flower from anyone before, nor had she been treated kindly by a woman.
Her name,
the girl said,
was Olga.
At first, Naomi didn't follow and just said,
My mother.
Oh, I see.
Naomi and Sunny were starting to get to know each other, even if by baby steps. In just a little more time, I imagined Naomi thinking, maybe the two of us could sit around a dinner table with Snake and Otacon, like a family. But she knew that time was one thing that neither she nor Snake had. I won't be there. I won't make it to that table. Smoke came from the edge of the lid, and Sunny scrambled for the spatula. We pulled together whatever equipment we could find on Nomad to provide Ryden some makeshift treatment, but it wasn't going to be nearly enough to keep him alive. Not that any doctor would know what to do with him, caught somewhere between man and machine. Carrying him to a hospital would only serve to inconvenience their staff. So we sat among our dark moods in Nomad's cargo bay, powerless to help as we watched Ryden slipping away. Snake wasn't faring too well either. He was reclined in a deck chair, holding an oxygen mask to his face like Michael Jackson, his aged body distressed by the thin air up in the mountains. The ability to rapidly adapt to changing environments belongs to the young, and personality isn't the only thing to become rigid with age. Snake could probably have been on the oxygen treatment sooner, but until now he'd endured to protect us from seeing him in his weakened condition. To break down his strong front, the climate and the battles in South America must have been incredibly severe. Putting up that front was his way of showing us kindness, and that kindness had become more than I could bear as well. Ryden moaned. Naomi and I ran over to the cot where his exoskeletal body rested. Ryden, I said, are you all right? He still seemed unable to move his lips. Instead, a computerized voice spoke from his throat.
Take me to Eastern Europe.
What are you talking about?
Naomi asked. Ryden, only barely conscious, turned his neck a fraction of an inch toward her and said,
There's equipment there that can heal me. Dr. Madnar, he saved my life.
What little strength he had was expended, and his head went limp on his pillow. Naomi leaned forward and reached out to caress Ryden's head, as if touching the memory of her brother. I'd heard Dr. Madnar's name before. Not a single engineer involved with robotics didn't know about his career. Rumor was that he was working on underground cybernetic research.
We're in luck then,
Naomi said.
We're going to Europe.
My eyebrows shot up.
What do you mean?
Said Snake, his voice muffled by the oxygen mask.
By we're in luck.
Naomi stood up, ready to explain.
Liquid is in Eastern Europe.
Snake and I looked at each other in surprise. This couldn't be a coincidence.
And what's he doing there?
Snake asked. Her next answer was an even bigger shock.
He's after the corpse of Big Boss.
I practically shouted, What?! 9 years ago, when Liquid's group claimed Metal Gear Rex and the stockpile of nuclear warheads, they demanded the legendary mercenary's remains. Their goal was to analyze his genes and find the cure for their genetic maladies. The members of the rogue forces in the rebellion at Shadow Moses had already begun to express symptoms of the diseases. They, like the clone Liquid, had been genetically enhanced with Big Boss's soldier genes, which imparted to them increased efficiency in battle and situational awareness. By now, Liquid inhabited Ocelot's body. Only Liquid's transplanted arm still contained his original genes. In a certain way, he'd been freed from the curse of Big Boss's genes that had plagued the three brothers. So why did he need Big Boss's corpse? Naomi answered the question that was on our faces.
It's the final key he needs to gain access to the SOP. The keys to the system are Big Boss's genetic code and biometric data. Without them, there's no way to gain access.
Then how had Liquid been hacking into SOP? In the research facility, Naomi said the chaos had not been a failure but a success. With her help, he had taken temporary control of the SOP. What's Liquid been doing all this time? I asked.
In the first test in the Middle East, he used the genetic code from his own DNA chip. In South America, he used the DNA code and biometric data extracted from Snake's blood.
That meant the results of tests she ran on Snake had been transmitted to Liquid. With a sidelong look, I studied her face for any traces of guilt or retreatance. It was Liquid's facility, so it would only be natural that he keep her equipment under surveillance. But what if she had deliberately passed on Snake's medical data? Was she here as part of Liquid's plan? Snake lowered his oxygen mask and shambled toward us. On the way, he casually scooped up his pack of cigarettes from the desk. He lit one and drew the smoke slowly into the back of his lungs.
What's the need for the original? He said. If a substitute works just as well.
Neither your genetic pattern nor Liquid's is 100% match for Big Bosses.
Snake coughed, choking on the smoke.
What do you mean we don't match?
I rubbed his back until his coughing fit subsided, and Naomi continued her explanation.
There's the markers implanted during the cloning process, the mixing of mitochondrial DNA within the cell egg, the deliberate altered terminator genes. Scientifically speaking, both of you and Liquid are as similar to Big Boss as you could possibly be. But there are still differences.
Snake and Liquid had always been told they were Big Boss's clones, born as reproductions of the legendary mercenary. But while it was correct that they carried Big Boss's genes, those genes had undergone numerous alterations. Liquid had shouted in the Middle East, "We're not copies of our father after all." Snake asked,
So that's what Liquid was talking about.
Naomi nodded.
Which is why they created Solidus.
President Johnson, before his death at the Big Shell decontamination facility, described Solidus as a well-balanced masterpiece, one neither solid nor liquid. From what Naomi was saying, Solidus was a higher precision clone of Big Boss. He was far closer to being identical to his father than either Solid or Liquid, at least genetically speaking. Solidus was born at the same time as his brothers, but he aged far more rapidly, not necessarily because of the alterations to his genetic code. There's something called clonal aging. The, supposedly, first cloned mammal, Dolly the sheep, was found to have shortened telomeres at birth. Clones inherit their telomeres from the donor at the same time the genetic sample was taken. They are born with cells that have already aged. Solidus was born from the cells of a Big Boss, already in his 50s. He wasn't programmed with a shortened lifespan like his brothers. He just aged faster than them. Not an engineered fate, this represented the natural, or at least expected, fate of any clone.
But Solidus is dead,
Snake said.
Listen carefully, Naomi said. This is the most important part.
Naomi summoned a diagram on the monitor. The graphic was an outline of a computer network, which at first glance resembled the inside of a living organism. Functions of life might as well have provided the basis of the security construct.
The AI that controls the system employs a highly aggressive Advanced Intrusion Detection System, or IDS. By using a special code to inspect all data and commands calculating within the network, any data that fails to confirm is treated as a foreign object and expunged like a virus killed by white blood cells.
Think of a network as the blood flowing through an organism's veins, with red and white blood cells and all the other essentials of life circulating within. The immune system watches for harmful bacteria and viruses hidden among the essentials and eliminates any material found swimming through the blood network without the proper codes. The Patriot system was molded after the human immune system. Attacking foreign objects required a method of distinguishing them from itself. The system needed to contain a self-definition, a form of code that specifies what it is. Naomi continued.
The authentication program this IDS uses is based on a genetic identification program, one I helped develop for FoxDie. It's set up so that host commands only execute properly if the key matches perfectly.
Should an intruder gain access to the Patriot's network and inject rogue code, that code, without the proper genetic sequence, would be ignored by the system.
However, if the IDS suspects an unauthorized user, the intruder's genetic code is registered on a blacklist. That code is then blocked and can never again be used to access the system. So, with other substitute codes, we've had to use a new genetic access code with each of our trials.
Snake exhaled smoke.
So when Liquid accessed the system in the Middle East and South America, those were only tests.
When Liquid used first his own code and then Snake's, the system initially accepted them as that of Big Boss, but upon detecting the slight variances within, it added them to the blacklist. I took a long, deep breath to ease my nerves. I can't believe this. That Snake and Big Boss don't have the same genetic code.
Strictly speaking, Naomi said, Snake and Liquid don't have the same genes either, which is why FoxDie only affected Liquid at Shadow Moses and spared you, Snake.
That was a mystery that had puzzled Snake ever since the moment when FoxDie froze Liquid's heart and Snake watched his brother sink into the snow. He could still remember that moment as if it had just happened.
Why did Liquid die? And not me? Weren't we the twin snakes?
No one knew why. Now Liquid had only one option left. Big Boss's true genetic code. Snake's and Liquid's codes were irrevocably on the IDS's blacklist.
Let me put it this way, Naomi said. If Liquid uses Big Boss's genetic code, the original, he'll have the system completely under his control.
Hold on.
Snake took the cigarette from his mouth.
I thought having his code wasn't enough. You need his biometric data at the same time, don't you?
Big Boss was already dead. Snake had killed him himself in Zanzibar land. the new country for mercenaries after the destruction of Outer Heaven. Genetic code could likely be harvested from Big Boss's body, which had been cryogenically preserved by the Patriots. But no amount of effort could restore his breathing, his pulse, or the flow of blood to his eyes, particularly not when the man had been dead for 15 years. But Naomi hadn't run out the revelations. Plainly, she stated,
No, he's alive.
What could we say to that? Big Boss was alive, but Snake was supposed to have killed his father. No, his original, in Zanzibar land. The man, who Snake had just thought to be some war-crazed lunatic, told him he was his father. Snake stood beside the fallen fighter and watched him die. In a certain way, he watched himself die.
Big Boss is alive,
Snake said.
Ridiculous.
His body is. Or rather, his cells. He's a brain-dead shell sustained in a lab.
I guess that could be called living. I glanced at Ryden lying on the medical bed. Most of his body had been replaced with a strengthened exoskeleton. The blood that flowed through him wasn't red. But although he'd lost his body, he still had his mind. And if that could be called living, could I say that Big Boss, with his mind dead but his body alive, was really dead? Perhaps that was nothing more than a problem of definition, a nebulous boundary between the phenomena of life and death. Whatever the case, if the system acknowledged the code, Big Boss was alive as far as Liquid was concerned. The concept of life means different things to different people in different places.
Liquid has already left for Europe in search of Big Boss's body. Even from the start, he never expected his experiment in South America to work. If he obtains the body, he'll be primed to make his final move.
If the Middle East and South America had been rehearsals, this would be opening night. Liquid would take command of the system and control each and every movement of the vast array of military forces around the globe. We had to stop him, no matter how. Snake and I looked at each other. Snake's eyes held the same resolve as mine. The battle in